The town is terraced in the hill along the river, a factory town of clapboard houses and public landings faced in red stone. There is a one room library called the Lyceum. There are several taverns made from porched homes, Miller and Bud signs hanging in neon in the front windows. Down at water's edge sits the old brass works, a long 2 story brick building with a tower at one end, and it is behind locked fences, and many of its windows are broken. The river is frozen. The town is dusted in new snow. Along the sides of the streets, the winter's accumulated snow is banked high as a man's shoulder. Smoke drifts from the chimneys of the houses and is quickly sucked into the sky. The wind comes up off the river and sweeps up the hill through the houses. A school bus makes its way through the narrow hill streets. The mothers and fathers stand on the porches above to watch the bus accept their children. It's the only thing moving in the town. The fathers fill their arms with firewood stacked by the front doors and go back inside. Trees are black in the woods behind the homes. They are black against the snow. Sparrow and finch dart from branch to branch and puff their feathers to keep warm. They flutter to the ground and hop on the snow crust under the trees. The children enter the school through the big oak doors with the push bars. It is not a large school, but its proportions, square and high, create hollow rooms and echoing stairwells. The children sit in their rows with their hands folded and watch their teacher. She is cheery and kind. She has been here just long enough for her immodest wish to transform these children to have turned to awe at what they are. Their small faces have been rubbed raw by the cold. The weakness of their fair skin is brought out in blotches on their cheeks and in the blue pallor of their eyelids. Their eyelids are translucent membranes, so thin and so delicate that she wonders how they sleep, how they keep from seeing through their closed eyes. She tells them she is happy to see them here in such cold weather, with a hard wind blowing up the valley and another storm coming. She begins the day's work with their exercise, making them squat and bend and jump and swing their arms and somersault so they can see what the world looks like upside down. How does it look? She cries, trying it herself, somersaulting on the gym mat until she's dizzy. They are not animated, but the exercise alerts them to the mood she's in. They watch her with interest to see what is next. She leads them out of the small, dimly lit gymnasium, through the empty halls, up and down the stairs, telling them they are a lost patrol in the caves of a planet somewhere far out in space. They are looking for signs of life. They wander through the unused schoolrooms, where canyon drawings hang from one thumbtack and corkboards have curled away from their frames. Look, she calls, holding up a child's red rubber boot, fished from the depths of a classroom closet. You never can tell. When they descend to the basement, the janitor, dozing in his cubicle, is startled awake by a group of children staring at him. He is a large, bearish man and wears fatigue pants and a red plaid woolen shirt. The teacher has never seen him wear anything different. His face has a gray stubble. "We are a lost patrol," she says to him. "Have you seen any living creatures hereabouts?" The janitor frowns. "What?" he says. "What?" It is warm in the basement. The furnace emits its basso roar. She has him open the furnace door so the children can see the source of heat, the fire in its pit. They are each invited to cast a handful of coal through the door. They do this as a sacrament. Then she insists that the janitor open the storage rooms and the old lunchroom kitchen, and here she notes unused cases of dried soup mix and canned goods, and then large pots and thick aluminum cauldrons and a stack of metal trays with food compartments. "Here, you can't take those," the janitor says. "And why not?" she answers. "This is their school, isn't it?" She gives each child a tray or pot, and they march upstairs, banging them with their fists to scare away the creatures of wet flesh and rotating eyes and pulpy horns who may be lying in wait around the corners. In the afternoon, it is already dark, and the school bus receives the children in the parking lot behind the building. The new street lamps installed by the county radiate an amber light. The yellow school bus in the amber light is the color of a dark egg yolk. As it leaves, the children, their faces indistinct behind the windows, turn to stare out at the young teacher. She waves, her fingers opening and closing like a fluttering wing. The bus windows slide past, breaking her image and reforming it, and giving her the illusion of the stone building behind her, sliding along its foundations in the opposite direction. The bus is turned into the road. It goes slowly past the school. The children's heads lurch in unison as the driver shifts gears. The bus plunges out of sight in the dip of the hill. At this moment, the teacher realizes that she did not recognize the driver. He was not the small, burly man with eyeglasses without rims. He was a young man with long, light hair and white eyebrows, and he looked at her in the instant he hunched over the steering wheel, with his arms about to make the effort of putting the bus into a turn. That evening at home, the young woman heats water for a bath and pours it in the tub. She bathes and urinates in the bath water. She brings her hands out of the water and lets it pour through her fingers. She hums a made-up tune. The bathroom is large, with wainscoting of wood strips painted gray. The tub rests on four cast iron claws. A small window high on the wall is open just a crack, and through it the night air sifts into the room. She lies back, and the cold air comes along the water line and draws its finger across her neck. In the morning, she dresses and combs her hair back and ties it behind her head and wears small opal teardrop earrings given to her for her graduation from college. She walks to work, opens up the school, turns up the radiator, cleans the blackboard, and goes to the front door to await the children on the yellow bus. They do not come. She goes to her teaching room, rearranges the day's lesson on the desk, distributes a sheet of stiff paper to each child's desk. She goes back to the front door and awaits the children. They are nowhere in sight. She looks for the school janitor in the basement. The furnace makes a kind of moaning sound. There is rhythmic intensification of its running pitch, and he's staring at it with a perplexed look on his face. He tells her the time, and it is the time on her watch. She goes back upstairs and stands at the front door with her coat on. The yellow bus comes into the school driveway and pulls up before the door. She puts her hand on the shoulder of each child descending the steps from the bus. The young man with the blonde hair and eyebrows smiles at her. There have been sacred rites and legendary events in this town. In a semi-pro football game, a player was killed. A presidential candidate once came and spoke. A mass funeral was held here for the victims of a shoe factory fire. She understands the new bus driver has no knowledge of any of this. On Saturday morning, the teacher goes to the old people's home and reads aloud. They sit there and listen to the story. They are the children's faces in another time. She thinks she can even recognize some of the grandmothers and grandfathers by family. When the reading is over, those who can walk come up to her and pluck at her sleeves and her collar, interrupting one another to tell her who they are and what they used to be. They shout, they mock one another's words, they waggle their hands in her face to get her to look at them. She cannot get out of there fast enough. In the street, she breaks into a run. She runs into the old people's home, is out of sight. It is very cold, but the sun shines. She decides to walk up to the mansion at the top of the highest hill in town. The hill streets turn abruptly back on themselves like a series of chutes. She wears lace-up boots and jeans. She climbs through snowdrifts in which she sinks up to the thighs. The old mansion sits in the sun above the tree line. It is said that one of the factory owners built it for his bride, and that shortly after taking possession, he killed her with a shotgun. The Greek columns have great chunks missing, and she sees chicken wire exposed under the plaster. The portico is hung with icicles, and snow is backed against the house. There is no front door. She goes in. The light of the sun and a fall of snow fill the entrance hall and its grand stairway. She can see the sky through the collapsed ceiling and a crater in the roof. She moves carefully and goes to the door of what must have been the dining room. She opens it. It smells of rot. There is a rustle and a hissing sound, and she sees several pairs of eyes constellated in the dark. She opens the door wider. Many cats are backed into a corner of the room. They growl at her and twitch their tails. She goes out and walks around to the back, an open field, white in the sun. There is a pitted aluminum straight ladder leaning against a windowsill in the second floor. She climbs the ladder. The window is punched out, and she climbs through the frame and stands in a light and airy bedroom. A hemisphere of ice hangs from the ceiling. It looks like the bottom of the moon. She stands at the window and sees at the edge of the field a man in an orange jacket and red hat. She wonders if he can see her from this distance. He raises a rifle to his shoulder, and a moment later, she hears an odd smack as if someone has hit the siding of the house with an open palm. She does not move. The hunter lowers his rifle and steps back into the woods at the edge of the field. That evening, the young teacher calls the town physician to ask for something to take. What seems to be the trouble? The doctor says. She conceives of a self-deprecating answer, sounding confident and assertive, even managing a small laugh. He says he will call the druggist and prescribe Valiums, 2 milligrams, so that she won't be made drowsy by them. She walks down to Main Street, where the druggist opens his door and, without turning on the store light, leads her to the prescription counter in the rear. The druggist puts his hand into a large jar and comes up with a handful of tablets and feeds the Valium one by one from his thumb and forefinger into a vial. She goes to the movie theater on Main Street and pays her admission. The theater bears the same name as the town. She sits in the dark and swallows a handful of tabs. She cannot discern the picture. The screen is white. Then what she sees forming on the white screen is the town in its blanket of snow. The clapboard houses on the hill, the frozen river, the wind blowing snow along the streets. She sees the children coming out of their doors with their school books and walking down their steps to the street. She sees her life exactly as it is outside the movie theater. Later, she walks through the downtown. The only thing open is the state news. Several men stand thumbing the magazines. She turns down Mechanic Street and walks past the tool and die company and crosses the railroad tracks to the bridge. She begins to run. In the middle of the bridge, the wind is a force, and she feels it wants to press her through the railing into the river. She runs bent over, feeling as if she is pushing through something, as if it is only giving way to her by tearing. Across the bridge, the road turns sharply left, and at the curve, At the foot of a hill of pine trees is a brown house with a neon sign in the window, the Rapids. She climbs up the porch steps into the Rapids and, looking neither left nor right, walks to the back where she finds the ladies' room. When she comes out, she sits in one of the varnished plywood booths and stares at the table. After a while, a man in an apron comes over and she orders a beer. Only then does she look up. The light is dim. A couple of elderly men are at the bar, but alone down at the end, established with his glass and a pack of cigarettes, is the new bus driver with the long blonde hair, and he is smiling at her. He has joined her. For a while, nothing is said. He raises his arm and turns in his seat to look toward the bar. He turns his head to look back at her. "You want another?" he says. She shakes her head, no, but doesn't say thank you. She digs in her coat pocket and puts a wrinkled dollar beside her bottle. He holds up one finger. "You from around here?" he says. "From the eastern part of the state," she says. "I'm from Valdez," he says, "down on 16. "Oh, yes." "I know you're their teacher," he says. "I'm their driver." He wears a wool shirt and a denim jacket and jeans. It is what he wears in his bus. He would not own a coat. There is something on a chain around his neck, but it is hidden under the shirt. Blonde beard stubble lies sparsely on his chin and along the line of his jaw. His cheeks are smooth. He is smiling. One of his front teeth is chipped. "What do you do to get to be a teacher?" "You go to college." She sighs. "What do you do to be a driver?" "It's a county job," he says. "You need a chauffeur's license and a clean record." "What is a dirty record?" "Why, if you've been arrested, if you have any kind of record, or if you got a bad service discharge." She waits. "I had a teacher once in the 3rd grade," he says. "I believe she was the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. I believe now she was no more than a girl, like you, but she was very proud, and she had a way of tossing her head and walking that made me wish to be a better student." She laughs. He picks up her beer bottle and feigns reproach and holds up his arm to the bartender and signals for 2. "It is very easy," she says, "to make them fall in love with you. Boys or girls. It's very easy." And to herself she admits that she tries to do it, to make them love her. She takes on a grace she doesn't really have at any other time. She moves like a dancer. She touches them and brushes against them. She's outgoing and shows no terror, and the mystery of her is created in their regard. "Do you have sisters?" she says. 2. "How do you know that?" "They're older than you?" "One elder, one younger." "What do they do?" "Work in the office of the lumber mill down there." She says, "I would trust a man who had sisters." He tilts his head back and takes a long pull at his beer bottle, and she watches his Adam's apple rise and fall, and the sparse blonde stubble on his throat move like reeds lying on the water. Later they come out of the rapids, and he leads her to his pickup. He is rather short. She climbs in and notices his work boots when he comes up into the cab from the other side. They're clean good boots, new yellow leather. He has trouble starting the engine. "What are you doing here at night if you live in Valdez?" she says. "Waiting for you." He laughs, and the engine turns over. They drive slowly across the bridge and across the tracks. Following her instructions, he goes to the end of the main street and turns up into the hills and brings her to her house. He pulls up in the yard by the side door. It is a small house, and it looks dark and cold. He switches off the engine and the headlights and leans across her lap and presses the button of the glove compartment. He says, "Happens I got me some party wine over here." He removes a flat bottle in a brown bag and slams the door. And as he moves back, his arm brushes her thigh. She stares through the windshield. She says, "Stupid goddamn mill hand, making his play with the teacher. Look at that, with his party wine in a sack. I can't believe it." She jumps down from the cab, runs around the truck, and up the back steps into her kitchen. She slams the door. There is silence. She waits in the kitchen, not moving, in the dark, standing behind the table, facing the door. She hears nothing but her own breathing. All at once, the back door is flooded with light. The white curtain on the door glass becomes a white screen, and then the light fades, and she hears the pickup backing out to the street. She's panting, and now her rage breaks, and she is crying. She stands alone in her dark kitchen crying, a bitter scent coming off her body, a smell of burning, which offends her. She heats water on the stove and takes it up to her bath. On Monday morning, the teacher waits for her children at the front door of the school. When the bus turns into the drive, she steps back and stands inside the door. She can see the open door of the bus, but she cannot see if he is trying to see her. She is very animated this morning. This is a special day, children, she announces, and she astonishes them by singing them a song while she accompanies herself on the auto harp. She lets them strum the auto harp while she presses the chords. "Look," she says to each one, "you are making music." At 11, the photographer arrives. He's a man with a pot belly and a black string tie. "I don't get these school calls till spring," he says. "This is a special occasion," the teacher says. "We want a picture of ourselves now. Don't we, children?" They watch intently as he sets up his tripod and camera. He has a black valise with brass latches that snap as he opens them. Inside are cables and flood lamps. used to be classes of kids, he says. Now, look at what's left of you. Heat this whole building for one room. By the time he is ready, the young teacher has pushed the benches to the blackboard and grouped the children in 2 rows, the taller ones sitting on the benches, the shorter ones sitting in front of them on the floor, cross-legged. She herself stands at one side. There are 15 children staring at the camera, and their smiling teacher holding her hands in front of her, like an opera singer. The photographer looks at the scene and frowns. Why, these children ain't fixed up for their picture. What do you mean? Why, they ain't got on their ties and their new shoes. You got girls here wearing trousers. Just take it, she says. They don't look right. Their hair ain't combed. These boys here. Take us as we are, the teacher says. She steps suddenly out of line and with a furious motion removes the barrette fastening her hair and shakes her head until her hair falls to her shoulders. The children are startled. She kneels down on the floor in front of them, facing the camera, and pulls 2 of them into her arms. She brings all of them around her with an urgent opening and closing of her hands, and they gather around her. One girl begins to cry. She pulls them in around her, feeling their bodies, the thin bones of their arms, their small shoulders, their legs, their behinds. Take it, she says in a fierce whisper. Take it as we are. We are looking at you. Take it.